Welcome to StrategEast panel discussion with the topic of IT investment funds in Eurasia. Let me introduce myself. My name is Lyazzat. I am a big tech manager for Kazakhstan StrategEast. And as speakers today we have Jonathan Tower, General Partner Catapult Venture Capital, Sergey Tokarev, Founding Partner Roosh, Pavel Koktyshev, Managing Partner and Co-founder of Most Ventures. You're welcome. Thank you for coming. The investment market in Eurasian countries is developing in different ways. In some countries, it's completely given over to private entities, and in other states, invest in IT companies and startups. Is there a correct way, or could we use these models be reconciled? How do IT investment funds in Eurasia countries make money today? What are the latest trends in investment? So let's welcome our first speaker, Jonathan Tower, with the topic Catapult Eurasia Digital Transformation Fund.
This one here? Okay. Thank you very much. So what we'll do is I'll give you a quick overview of who we are as a fund and how we came together and why I'm here in Central Asia. And I'd like to start with a quote from Steve Case, who's arguably sort of the grandfather of the modern tech age. And he recently was quoted saying that the pandemic has shifted the locus of innovation away from Silicon Valley to emerging tech hubs, and that the next wave of unicorns was going to come from these hubs, but that they needed to still access Silicon Valley to get to a level of global scale. We think Steve is right, and we actually built a fund more or less around that thesis. So we're Catapult. We're a global seed stage platform. We're a cross-border fund. We invest in digital transformation companies that are coming primarily from emerging markets. We have been investors for more than 20 years. We've seeded 26 unicorns in our careers. And we focus primarily on markets that we consider talent-rich but capital-short. And we have boots on the ground in 12 fast-emerging tech hubs, and we're growing. And our thesis is quite simple. We believe that the global pandemic is arguably the largest forced life disruption event in human history. And we've experienced 30 years of digital transformation in basically 30 months. And that now this concept of geography and capital has been decoupled. And what I mean by that is for 50 plus years, there was this notion that if you wanted to build a global technology company, you needed to be in Silicon Valley, or maybe Boston, or maybe New York. It was very hard to do it outside of those hubs. But that has changed in the last 10 to 15 years, and that has absolutely accelerated in the last 3 years since pandemic. Because now people realize they can build companies anywhere in the world. They don't need to be in Silicon Valley. It doesn't mean that Silicon Valley is dead. It's that Silicon Valley is everywhere now. And we believe that Central Asia is well positioned to be a dominant tech hub for the next decade. So what we're doing is we're actually exploring doing a fund, a cross-border fund, really connecting the US and Eurasia. And it will provide Eurasian startups a bridge to Silicon Valley and the US while enabling US startups access to fast-emerging Eurasia. Sorry, a little bit of technology lag here. It's not advancing. Can you guys accelerate the slide? Doesn't seem to be working with my... I don't know. Okay. Oh. All right, well, give us a second here. We'll have to reboot here. Sorry. All right, we'll move really quickly to where we were. Okay. So we'll talk a bit about our investment history and track record. I'm actually going to stand up because I'm getting hot sitting in this chair. So as I mentioned, we've been investors for about 20 years. We've invested more than $713 million in more than 320 companies, and we've had 100 exits. in those companies. So roughly a third of our companies have now gotten to an exit. My partners and I have all come out of pretty well-established Silicon Valley venture funds like Andreessen Horowitz and Norwest. And we've generated almost $20 billion in exits and about a 5 times return on capital with many companies that you might have heard of, like Dollar Shave Club, and Cabbage, Jet, and a number of others that have gone on to great things. And we have about 16 companies that are still private but are still in the portfolio. So these are companies like Rappi and Zenefits and Gusto. And many of these companies were companies we actually funded when they were seed stage, which is very important. All right, it's a very different business when you're getting into a company that's already worth $2 billion and now they're worth $4 billion. That's great. It's a very different business when you're starting with a company that is literally 3 people and a PowerPoint, and now they're worth $20 billion. So that's a very different journey that you're involved in as a venture investor. So let's talk about why we are forming this fund. And it really comes down to 4 core themes. Again, we believe this post-pandemic digital transformation boom is real, it's sustained. We're not going back to the way things were in early 2020. And it has fueled a remote workforce revolution we've all read about. Now, what that means is, it was already in process the last 10 or 15 years. We began to see the emergence of tools and technologies like Trello and Asana and Zoom and all sorts of technologies that allowed you to cross-collaborate really around the world. And that was accelerated by the pandemic, and we're not going back to that. This has also fueled the rise of these smaller tech hubs that have caught up very quickly with Silicon Valley, and specifically the growth of the Eurasian tech ecosystem. So at the end of the day, we believe we're in a second or third inning of what is clearly a transformation boom, and it's global. And that basically means that every vertical under the planet, from commerce to new media to real estate, is being radically transformed by technology. What is also an important phenomenon is that unicorns are breaking out of everywhere now. It's not just a Silicon Valley phenomenon. You're seeing massive unicorns coming out of the usual suspects in terms of China and Europe, but now they're coming out of LATAM, they're coming out of Southeast Asia, they're coming out of the Baltics. And again, this is not a trend that is receding anytime soon. But what this does is it makes investing in Eurasia very attractive. One of the things that we like about these markets is that it gives us leverage on our capital in ways that we cannot get in Silicon Valley. What I mean by that is, as an investor, we can write a fairly modest check in a company in a market like Central Asia and give that company a year and a half or 2 years of runway. That same amount of money in Silicon Valley might get you 3 months. And therefore, you're not in the same sort of category where you're constantly raising capital as you are in the US, and every time you're raising capital, you're getting diluted, you're creating a different type of animal than you are in a smaller market where the entrepreneurs tend to be more scrappy, they tend to be more cost effective, and as an investor, we like to look for that. Why we think this is the right time to invest in Eurasia? You heard some of these points earlier with my panel mate here, Pavel, talking about the quality of the founders getting better with every cycle. We're also seeing the beginning of some of these startups actually beginning to emerge out of the local ecosystem and beginning to penetrate the US market, beginning to penetrate the European market, and that's a very important thing that we notice. We're also seeing some exits now. Now, these aren't huge exits. There's a modest by Silicon Valley standards, but it begins to show that you have a pattern of companies actually getting to a good outcome, and investors returning their cash and hopefully making a little bit of money. And that creates a flywheel effect where more investors begin to notice what's happening here in the region, and they begin to invest, and that's where you get the multiplier effect. Obviously, this region also boasts very low operating costs, very reasonable valuations, and as I mentioned previously, that's very attractive to investors such as Catapult. We're also seeing, obviously, since what happened in Ukraine 6 or 8 months ago, this emergence of lots of other people from other neighboring regions coming here, right? Russian expats, Ukrainian entrepreneurs moving into the region, starting their companies here and not leaving and wanting to create an ecosystem here. And then finally, we believe there's an attractive combination of economic growth, compliant government support, and the location, which makes this an ideal region to be quite dominant in the coming decade. So we think this is the right time to launch a fund. We'll have a first mover advantage as a US-based Silicon Valley fund. We'll be the first of that kind to establish a physical presence in the region and build a critical bridge to Silicon Valley for local startups to become globally competitive. We built a global platform, as I mentioned, and so this is not our first rodeo, as we say. We now have boots on the ground in 12 tech hubs, both 6 markets in North America, and we have 6 markets in Europe. With this new fund, we hopefully will build a foothold in the market with a headquarters in Nur Sultan, and that will allow us to expand across the region. These are standard terms that I can follow up with offline, and I'll wrap up with my contact information. Happy to chat with anybody during the break. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your speech. And the second speaker will be the Sergey Tokarev, Roosh. So today, Sergey, we will talk in face-to-face talk, and I will give you some questions, and please answer on it. What are the features of the activities of your investment firm?
Thank you. First of all, I want to underline that our approach is quite unique, and I would like to explain how it works. So Roosh Ventures is the part of Ukrainian tech ecosystem called Roosh, and our vision is to put Ukraine on the global AI ML map and to create a go-to hub for AI ML projects in Eastern Europe. And despite the war, we made a significant progress in this field. So how it works? All components of our ecosystem share mutually valuable resources. We engage talented people at our tech university called SET University that we just launched this year, and AI House. AI House is an upskilling community for machine learners, and we have around 1,000 machine learners in this community at the moment. So we recruit them and provide them with opportunities to grow in machine learning and artificial intelligence, and as well in IT product development and management, all thanks to our educational initiatives. Utilizing the human capital, the power, our ML Venture Builder Studio tests its hypothesis and launch AI and ML-based startups. And the Roosh Ventures itself is an early-stage sector-agnostic VC firm, providing a range of unique added values from the Roosh ecosystem. Roosh Ventures' primary goal is to build deep partnerships with the best tech entrepreneurs, founders, and win the most competitive deals. The secondary goal is to support Roosh projects with complementary VC expertise and global network. Also, we have Reface app in our ecosystem. This is a company that we have founded. This is application for video face swap, and it has more than 250 million downloads at the moment. And we have as well Zebra AI. This is 3D render company for game developers based on ML. So those companies are a great example of how the ecosystem functions and how it works and generates successful startups. The attention and reputation created by these projects attract new talented AI and ML specialists, as well as advisors and investors. And secondly, the background of our founders differs us from other venture capital firms in our region. My partner, Dan Dmitrienko, and I are both entrepreneurs, and we have founded many companies. So we know what it's like to build the startup from the scratch, and we have heard hundreds of different pitches, and we have practical knowledge how to build a startup. Because of our background, we know what startup founders are looking in venture capital firms, and it's definitely not just the money. And as an example, when we were looking for investments for Reface, we received more than 25 term sheets from top-notch, world-known funds, including Sequoia Capital and Andreessen Horowitz. And we were choosing the VC that will help us to grow the company, that will help us with marketing, will help us with hiring the talents in Silicon Valley, and not just the money. And by the way, 2 years passed since we raised the money, and we didn't even touch $1 from the money we fundraised. So that's how usually it works.
Okay, thank you. So, what are the main objections that local investment funds face when trying to attract investments to a region from large Western funds?
So, in my opinion, investment funds, and especially Western ones, are always looking for the real partners. So, it's important to know what value you and your team is putting on the table. In our case, for example, we offer expertise in AI, ML from every CTO of our companies that's in our ecosystem, and that's the beauty of building an ecosystem. We help with recruitment of exceptional machine learners through our dedicated recruitment team. We provide the guidance in business development, and we provide the connections to our network of other VC firms, entrepreneurs, and startup founders. And we support ML-based tech requests by our AI ML outsourcing company that we have in our portfolio as well. This company called Neurons Lab. So we provide outsourcing service in AI ML niche. Half of our machine learners in this company have PhD degree. So it's really like science-based company. And for example, we had such case in Neurons Lab when one very big gaming company that last year just went public for a couple of tens of billions valuation. They asked Neurons Lab to help with moderation of their voice chats for their players because their players is abusing each other, yes, during the game and use some bad words, and they need to control it. So the Neurons Lab made a solution, and that's how we became a shareholder on the special conditions in the same company. So that's how it works.
Interesting. So what is the key focus for your venture firm right now?
We focus mainly US and European markets and invest in technology startups at various stages from seed to Series C. In terms of sector, we are agnostic with a slight focus on fintech, gaming, and Web3. And only because I personally have experience in those niches because I founded a few companies in those sectors. The fund's portfolio includes 34 startups at the moment. Roosh Ventures invests $20 to $25 million per year. This year we invested more than 10 companies. And our last investment was American gaming and esports company called Regression Games. Which has raised $4 million to bring an AI power to gaming and esports competitions. New Enterprise Associates fund led the round with participation of Andreessen Horowitz, BBQ Capital, and us. And this is actually the part of our strategy. That's how we work. To co-invest with leading no need to introduce venture firms, and networking is essential in this process. And right now, by the way, we are launching our second 80 million fund, and we are looking for partners.
Okay, so you said that Roosh Ventures invests 25
25
million
million per year, yeah.
per year. Each year you are investing like this. Wow. So several states in Eurasia have established their own venture capital funds. Is this a competition or help for private foundation?
I don't believe that states are efficient in creating their own venture funds and investing in startups. In my opinion, they just don't have enough experience to do the quality work, and this often ends up in different corruption schemes. But there are good examples, like European Investment Fund is a very good example how the cooperation might work. But the government is quite good at being LPs in the private funds. And it can be good strategy to create a fund of funds and support the private funds in the country, in the region, to expand and to boost the startup ecosystem.
So what do we need to learn from the Western countries? How do you think?
I think that this region and our region, from where am I, from Ukraine, really need transparent justice system, and it's really important to feel for startuppers to feel very safe that nobody from the government will come and just get your company. As well, it's very important to have a competitive taxation system, which I can see in this region is already expanding, like zero taxes on startups in almost every country here, and it's very good if Uzbekistan will do the same. And as well, it's very important to have tax credits for tech companies. For example, when you launch the startup, you shouldn't pay the taxes in the beginning, because you have to allocate all your resources to boost your startup as
No
much
taxes.
as possible.
No taxes when you enter in, yes?
No taxes when you enter the market. Yeah, of course. That's how I think. And of course, as I mentioned already, the fund of funds could be very good for Uzbekistan to have, and it will help to boost the local ecosystem.
Okay. So what does it take to make a prosperous venture firm?
All I mentioned above, plus international experience. That's what we need to learn from best practices from all around the world, especially when the tech ecosystem is not developed here in this region. So we have to get the best examples from the similar countries. For example, Uzbekistan should take the example from Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan should take these examples from Ukraine, which is more like developed in this meaning. And of course, we have to always to look at emerging markets and to get their best cases, best experiences, and bring founders and investors from there, so they will help as well to bootstrap startups here.
Okay. To apply best practices from other countries, yes, okay. So the last question, please share your recommendations on how to develop the ecosystem. Could you share some tips on how to develop an ecosystem?
I think it's very important to have just one successful startup. And when one successful startup will appear here and the first exit will happen, it will boost the whole sphere a lot, because it will give the power of belief to other IT specialists that they can fund the company and they can make the successful startup, and then they can exit then. So the good examples, successful examples are very, very important to create an ecosystem. I think it's like snowball when you have the first success. So that's what the government should do here, in my opinion, is to help to choose one niche, one startup, and to help to boost it as much as possible.
Okay. Yeah, we agree with you. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
speech. And we will go to the third speaker. And please, Pavel Koktyshev, manager partner and co-founder of Most Ventures. Please, could you share your presentation?
That's a great presentation, by the way. It's not mine, but that's great.
Should we invest?
Definitely, yeah. I asked, asked guys yesterday. Okay, I have easiest job today because I just need to agree with the two gentlemen before me. So they made the greatest kind of arguments why the Central Asian is picking up, why the emerging markets is great and it's not spoiled, like in terms of like the valuation, like all other stuff. Yeah, please, can you launch my presentation? Yeah, it was on the screen a few times before, but then it's swapped with Zipple AI. Pavel, yes.
Yes.
And now I want all of you to see our logo and all this stuff, and some. Do you have a clicker? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Also stand to make it more kind of serious in terms of promoting the Central Asia for you once again. So yeah, the Jonathan made really vocal arguments why the Central Asia it's picking up and how the trends going on right now. Here is some quotes from the very esteemed organization. Here is some numbers, how it's growing. I mean, it's great to see why the Central Asia is great in a statement, but the numbers are much more, I would say, informative. And not only from the perspective of finding the great talents from here, but also and bringing them to the global markets, but also about, okay, what we can do here, what kind of businesses we can build, at least in the Central Asia. Or in some countries in a separate. But I mentioned, and I showed these slides before in a previous session, but if you haven't seen them yet, so just look at these numbers. So we see the really huge growth potential in many industries, including e-commerce, the fintech, and we lack of the official data today about digital economies in all Central Asia countries, but we can still put some projections and to see how it's going to be, how growth is going to be in the next few years in the decade. So the all countries looks promising: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. And I mentioned before, if you look through this news about who won this kind of cybersecurity competition, or like chess competition, or next like student Olympiad on mathematics, you usually could find some people from that region. And we are a local firm, and we with our partners, all of us born here in Central Asia, and we know our people really well. And even in this kind of situation, when you well-established organization locally, you see that, okay, nobody can bring you new ideas or like the new startups. But just we recently went to US trip a month ago, and we spent about 1 month in US, in different states, just traveling and meeting like VCs, like startup founders. And only during that trip, it was overwhelmed with the meetings with startup founders from the Central Asia. Of course, our network very strong from the Kazakh diaspora, from Kyrgyz diaspora, Uzbek diaspora, and every day we met so many people, and we discovered at least 5 more like alumnus of Y Combinator from Central Asia. But before this trip, we knew about only one of this company and one of this founder. So the networking effect, it's huge, and a lot of founders from the Central Asia, they already kind of trying to conquer the world, the big markets, and it's for sure showing the great respect for the region. And it's not only like the simple words that the people here are brilliant and great. No, there is the proofs of this statement. We are not classical like VC firm. Yeah, we just following the startup on every crucial development stage, and we I founded Most back in 2011, and then we spent a lot of time doing the networking events like conferences, knowledge sharing sessions. Then we turned this organization into the first private business incubator, and now it's the full-scale kind of entrepreneurial support ecosystem, the private one. So me personally, I switched to the government position back in 2018 and helped to set up the Astana hub as a first kind of technopark in the region. But then I see that so many other initiatives appeared in other countries. And now the government closed at least pre-seed and seed stage together with universities, with different public initiatives, with international organizations. And now we see the organic growth of the whole the tech landscape in Kazakhstan, in Central Asia, that we now can focus on a real kind of VC business. Because if and I'm really happy that we have such well-established organizations like Catapult, like Quest Ventures, like 500 Global, and other firms who already expressed interest in the region and start some investment activities. It's just showing us that it's organic growth. It's not only naive and a very kind of positive view on the market. No, it's now more about like realistic approach to the market. And Most today plays a crucial role just to putting together all these different state initiatives as well, because while I was in a different position, on a government position, start traveling in the region, of course, I felt some competition between the different technoparks, organizations, because they need to prove the existence of these organizations, some budget money. And of course, when this, on an official level, you start discussing the partnerships, you usually end up at the memorandum level, right? But when you see the real businesses, the investors, they interested in a market discovery, right? They don't interested very much into politics. They very much interested into the founders and helping them to scale up. So that's the philosophy and the whole approach of the Most. Most today have and running the flagship programs, incubation program, acceleration programs, to make it clear, just passing through, we build up the strong partnership. So here you can see our advisory board and our people who serves as a shareholders as well to our holding company. It also includes the management company, the VC firm. We have a pretty strong and ambitious investment committee, including international experts in digital development and venture capital. We have a very young but ambitious team to help and nurture our portfolio companies to scale and grow their businesses. And of course, we want to see more deals. We want to see more partnerships between the venture funds in the region. We want to see more the government agencies or like the different big companies from the region as LPs to this foundation, because if ecosystem emerging, we see the kind of separation of activity, right? And every player have their own role. We cannot substitute VC firms with government agencies or any government entities. But I totally agree with Sergey that we need them as LPs to serve these big and ambitious goals. Yeah, and we also now we're deploying the existing fund, 10 million funds, already 2 million deployed. We do have a very great portfolio companies from all across the region. We do a lot of, and I'll just to save your time. I just want to tell a short story about this specific startup, Adapt. Because we touched this company in a very early stage, back in 2014. Two guys, the students from the second course of international IT universities in Almaty. They attended our hackathon we organized with Halyk Bank. It's the largest bank in Kazakhstan. And we advocated the management of the bank to promise for the winning team of the hackathon to implement this project in the real day scenarios. And thanks to the Umut Ahmedov, the CEO of the bank, they fulfilled their promise. Of course, the team of the lawyers, the corporate lawyers, like security guys, they started figuring out, okay, how we can do the contract with the two students. They didn't have even the IP or like юридическую форму. It was just two people, two individuals, and they hired them. A year later, they hired their company, the register, to create the mobile app of the Halyk Bank. The outsourcing company these two guys created, they sold their company and they switched their forces to create the Adapt company. It's a product and it's globally scaling today. And it's a really transformation story of Central Asia. Yeah, they started from the very small. I mean, starting from the just attending the small hackathon, then investing the time and resources in their business knowledge, their experience, and now it turns to the very great company with a great ambition and a great chance to be the next unicorn from Kazakhstan. So we are here to do a lot of similar stories. Please invest in our next fund. So let's do a great story together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and speech. And if you never mind, we will go to the question and answer session for our speakers. And the first who will reply to my question will be Jonathan Tower. Jonathan, what are the challenges you see for the Eurasian ecosystem?
Well, I mean, there are a number of challenges in any emerging tech ecosystem. I don't think Central Asia is that different. You know, the thing that we see, and I travel around the world and I meet with government ministers around the world. I don't say that to impress you. I say that to impress upon you that it's a very common set of challenges. A lot of it is infrastructure. I mean, I think you can talk about mindset all day long, and mindset is very important. And I think Sergey did a great job of talking about why that first unicorn is so critical to change the mindset, to make entrepreneurs feel that there is a path forward. I have a career path here. So I think the one challenge is getting the mindset shift with entrepreneurs and with the infrastructure itself, the constituents. I think the second challenge is, to borrow a corny phrase, it takes a village. In other words, it's not enough for my fund or most or Roosh to come in and throw checks out the window and expect something to happen, right? We have to mentor these startups. We have to hold their hand. We've got to help them connect to the right partners to get to a level of global scale. If you can't break out of Uzbekistan, you're probably not going to become a massive company, right? Nothing against Uzbekistan, just that's the nature of it. These are smaller markets, and so if you want to build a unicorn company that's going to be sustainable for more than a year, you need to probably tackle the U.S., tackle the European markets, get out of just your local market. That means you need to have great partners that can help you do that. And so mindset's a big part of that. And if you don't have a tradition of exits, what are the young entrepreneurs going to look to? What are their models against that, right? So you need to create that first big breakout company where all the other entrepreneurs can say, okay, there's actually a career path for me here to make a startup successful, and I don't need to move to Silicon Valley to do it. I can do it right here in my home country. And that is a very important shift. So that's challenge number one. I think the second challenge is around working with local governments to understand that they have to build a regulatory framework that is startup friendly, right? Whether it's bankruptcy laws, taxation was discussed on this panel before, stock options, things that are much more on parity with the West, certainly with the US, and even with Europe. Europe is still behind, but they're catching up quickly. And so I think that's very important because, again, you want to attract investors to come and believe in what you're doing, plant the flag, open an office, and begin investing. In order for them to feel comfortable here, they want to feel like they're protected. There are rules that are reliable, that they aren't going to get the rug pulled out from underneath them. Like Sergey said, they don't want their company taken away from them or their assets frozen or their bank accounts frozen. The moment you can create a regulatory framework where investors feel safe, they will come here, they will invest here, and they will make a long-term commitment to the region. So those are the two challenges that I think are the things I run into the most.
Okay, understand. Infrastructure for long-term cooperation. Okay, so there are many people from big corporations and development institutions. How do you think, which role could global tech companies play in developing the ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, global tech companies are a very important part of any of these ecosystems because, as I mentioned before, in order for these startups to be, successful on a global scale, they need to partner. And very often there are lots of large companies here that have a physical presence in the region. And so I think for them to be able to help these companies by creating programs to support them, to have partnerships with them, to enable them to access their resources, whether it's financial or engineering or other types of resources, I think that's very important to build a sort of a rapport and a sense of collaboration with startups. So I think there's a lot of things that the Metas of the world, the Googles of the world that have physical presence in the region can do more proactively to help these companies become successful. Not just so they can buy them in a year or two. That's fine. That's great too. We like that. We like M&A. But we also like collaboration as well. We want them to open their doors and try to find ways to support these startups as well.
I understand. It will be to support the startups for win-win cooperation, like company is giving to startup and startup also should return to the company something. Yeah. And can global tech companies invest in startups? Can they invest in venture investments?
Yes to both. I'd say they're different scenarios. So I think it's been discussed on this panel. We love when corporates are LPs in our fund, because it's a great buy-in for us. It's a great vote of confidence in what we're doing. It also allows corporations to have access to sort of the future of technology innovation. It gives them a window into innovations when these companies are fairly early, but it also protects them as well. I think where it gets difficult is when companies are very early and they're taking money from corporations. It's a double-edged sword. And an example I'll give you is if you're a startup and you're raising your seed round or your Series A and one of your investors is BMW. Nothing wrong with BMW. But is that going to complicate your ability to do a deal with Mercedes? Right? So you have these issues where you could be taking the corporate money, but it could come with some strings attached. It could compromise your ability to do other things, or you may find a corporate parent coming in, investing in your round, and then they may want access to certain data or access to certain customer information, and that could be problematic for you as you do other deals with other partners. And so I think you have to be very careful when you're an early stage company and you're taking money from corporates because of some of the conflicts. As you get a bit longer or more mature and you're talking about Series D, Series E, it's not as big a deal because at that point, the company is presumably doing very well. You're raising tens of millions of dollars in that round, and maybe BMW puts 25 million in the round. That's fine, right? I'm doing an investment right now. We're going to write I think it's a $40 million check, and FedEx is writing a $40 million check, but the company's raising 250 million, and it's worth $2 billion. So it's different when it's already a company that's doing very well, and FedEx wants to put some money in, or Walmart wants to put some money in. There's no problem. But when you're very young, I think it can cause a lot of conflict, so be very careful. It's much better if you're corporate to put your money in a venture fund, build that relationship. If that venture fund does their job right, they will show you their portfolio companies, they will make introductions if it's appropriate, so you'll have a window into innovation, but you'll be protected from some of the conflicts that arise when you're directly investing in those companies.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much. Maybe our speakers want to add something? No? Okay, so my question will be to Pavel. Pavel, as I know, recently you was in USA, and together with business angels to show them how to invest and apply in their investment in big perspective startups to receive a rapid ROI, return of investment, and profit from these startups. You said that the main goal is to build bridge for investors and startups between Central Asia and USA. Could you please to provide more details?
Yeah, most it's a bridge actually, and the whole business is about building the bridges and the connection. So technically, we do have the all components of the good working ecosystem right now, right here, right? We do have high net worth individuals, we do have talented people, but at the same time, what we cannot overjump, it's just the learning process. And of course, if you are high net worth individuals starting to be interested in tech companies, yeah, the most probably your first deals will be rubbish, right? And you will lose your money. And if you are not following the very simple rules of knowledge sharing, co-investing with other people and other kind of risk mitigating steps, you again will most probably will lose money. And of course, when we talking about the Kazakhstan ecosystem, for example, it's the early stage, and a lot of people start investing in IT companies. The whole idea bringing them to US, to Silicon Valley, is just to introduce them to the well-functioned angel groups, to show them what kind of co-investment models they have, and to show them some portfolio companies from the large funds and the large angel investors groups. We are officially registered the company in the AIFC, and we are following all the rules of the regulatory authority. We are not just do a kind of MLM type of financial pyramid. Yeah, we are really grateful to those people who start investing in a startup. At the same time, we want them to make return on their investment. And most probably, if they make the investment portfolio from some US companies, some Central Asian companies, some like Southeastern Asian companies, they most likely will make return on their investment. We are not just passionately promote the Central Asia. We are responsible, the group of and the management company, and we try to do our best for our people, because if they getting more involved into tech sphere, they're more likely join our next funds as LPs. They're more likely acquire the startups as the business owners at the same time. Yeah, it's a cultural thing. It's a learning curve. It cannot be. I mean, you cannot miss important steps along you learning, right? That's why we are facilitating all this process. It's great. Again, we have a lot of things Asana Hub doing today, but again, you cannot substitute every single element of ecosystem with government organization. We have to have strong entrepreneurial support community, and the whole idea when I'm talking to the ministers, to people who are really passionate about making the Kazakhstan it's a great destination for tech companies. Yeah, I'm starting telling them, okay, work with and support the supporters first, and then all these people with their expertise, with their network, will support the startups. That's the most easiest way to do it smoothly and most effective way.
And the second question, for your opinion, which startups will be the most attractive for business angels and investors? Could you please reply to us, Pavel?
Zipple AI, Adapt, and so many other brilliant teams here. The only kind of reason, and I heard their fund venture industry agnostic, their fund industry agnostic. Our fund is industry agnostic. I cannot tell you the exact kind of industry. I see Rafal, the fintech, the definitely most important thing. But on another hand, we invest in the people, and if it's a great team, if they do right pivots along the way, they will definitely succeed. That's an answer. Because investors in the early stage invest in the teams, not in a PowerPoint presentation, not even into the MVP products.
Okay. But we also should receive the profit, yes? Of course. Yeah. Right people bring the right profit, right? And Sergey, and for you, the question, could you please tell us what is the attractiveness of Uzbekistan for international venture capital industry?
I think here is a very good math base, thanks to probably Soviet Union. Yeah, and when I talked to people yesterday and today here, I learned that a lot of very well educated people here, and that's what actually for IT sector needed to know very good math and to know how to use it. So I think it's very big perspective here because of it. And I've heard yesterday the story that not only the algebra is from here, but as well algorithm. It's Uzbekistan word, because it was the name algorithmis, the guy who invented it.
Yeah.
So I think that is the most important. Just learn math as hard as you can, and the others will happen.
Except math, what we need to do.
I mean, in general, education is the most important, and people is the most important. That's why, in our case, for example, we opened a tech university, because you teach people, you educate people, then you hire them, then they get the experience, and then they decide to fund their own startups. And then you invest in those startups and bring international investments, and that's how it works. Like, it's a closed loop. So just education.
Okay. Everything starts from education.
Everything.
For sustainable growth.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
The people is the key. That's it.
Okay, so maybe from audience we have some questions to our speakers. Okay, please.
Hello, my name is Aytugan. I represent Kazakhstani private equity company, Kazna Capital Management, which basically operates as a fund of funds. So my question is to Jonathan. In the new upcoming fund, Catapult Eurasia Fund, what will be the minimum and maximum size for seed and pre-seed investment?
In terms of the amount that we will write checks into companies?
Yeah, ticket size per check.
Yeah, I mean, we can write, I mean, we can go as little as $50,000. It's all case by case. I mean, our point is we want to have, significant ownership, because we know we're going to be in that company for a while and it's going to take a lot of work. So we like to be significant investors in the company. But typically our sweet spot is between, 50 to about 250 in a seed stage investment. We go from sort of 250 to $1 million in a Series A or a bit more. It really depends on the opportunity and how capital intensive the business is, right? And we have a whole slide deck that obviously I don't have time to go into. We talk about the funnel from seed to Series A to Series B, and how you have matriculation in the funnel over time, and how we layer in more capital and we get our pro rata rights. The important thing is that we want to make sure that we protect our ownership as those companies exit, because as we all know, in order to have a significant fund that's successful, you need to have shots on goal. You have to have enough companies in the portfolio, because the reality is that seed stage investing is inherently a high fatality business. Most of your companies will not do very well. That's just the nature of the business when you invest at seed. Most will go to zero. That's okay, as long as you have enough of them in your portfolio that you're going to get that 10x, 20x return that pays for all the ones that didn't work out. So we have to have enough companies in the portfolio to take advantage of the reality that you're going to have a lot of fatalities. And then the ones that exit, you have a significant ownership, right? So if you have a $200 million exit, you own 20%, that's $40 million, right? That's what you want, to get a couple of those to return the fund, then some, raise fund 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever you're on, and build a platform. And so we like to start small, 50K to 250, 250 to $1 million for early Series A, and then we scale up from there.
Thank you.
Okay, so maybe we have now one question from audience. Yes, please. Could you give a microphone here? Except microphone, we're giving a camera. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Vasil Karaivanov. I'm from Bulgaria. I'm chairman of the board of Sofitech Park. But in the last 20 years, I've been dealing a lot in corporate finance and M&A business. I was investment banker in Bulgaria, Serbia, Macedonia, the regions. And I've been working on many sell-side mandates. And one of the biggest problems was the mindset, as Jonathan said, but the mindset in the way that entrepreneurs, they want to sell their companies, so attract investors. They are eager to do it, but very often when the advisor brings them the buyer, they would say, no, I'm not ready to sell. This is my life. I invested my heart in it, and I'm not ready just to drop it just like this. So my question is, do you see this kind of attitude, this kind of mindset here in Eurasia? Because I don't know this market here. Thank you.
Yeah,
And how do you tackle with this problem?
It's a common problem. You do see it more in emerging markets than I find in the US because, to the point we've been making, you don't have the examples of multiple billion-dollar exits in these markets like you do in the US. And so people don't think that that's even possible. And so when a young entrepreneur, not even that young an entrepreneur, gets an opportunity where they have $20, $30 million exit staring at the face, it's very hard to say no. And so we do run into that. I think for us, you know, we don't get into the business to do a 1.5x. We try to get these big returns. And so if we feel that the entrepreneur is selling too soon, we're certainly going to counsel them as best we can to hold on, to build a bigger business. You'll have a bigger outcome later. Now that obviously has to do with board dynamics and whether we have control. That's a whole separate panel we can do on board dynamics. So in some cases we don't have the ability to drive that, but sometimes we do. And it's a difficult conversation, but hopefully you're able to make a case to the entrepreneur that there is a bigger opportunity and you're building a bigger business than is in front of you, so don't sell too early. But you know, every VC struggles with that issue.
So thank you for your question. So do we have any other question to our speakers? One more question? No? I have a question to all our speakers. So you can decide who will reply, okay? How do you think? Do global tech companies like Google or Meta or Microsoft invest in startups and venture funds? Are they engaged in venture investments? I can repeat.
So let me maybe, can I look at the question?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
sorry, I couldn't quite. Which one is it, dear? The second one?
Here.
Okay.
Here.
So do global tech companies like Google, Meta, Microsoft invest in startups and venture funds? Yes, to both. They do. I think we talked a little bit about some of the challenges when they invest directly in companies, especially when they're early, so we don't have to repeat that, but it is a challenge. It's much better where they invest in venture funds. We much prefer that they are partners with us. You know, I think the other thing that is good by being an investor, an LP in a fund, is what we call headline risk. And what headline risk is that, you know, occasionally we'll invest in a company that blows up spectacularly. And you don't want your name in the paper necessarily if you're a big company and one of our investments went belly up, right? So by being an LP in a fund, the term LP means limited partner. You are limited. It also means you have limited liability and limited headline risk exposure. And so if you are an LP in a catapult fund and we put some money in a company and God forbid that company failed and it becomes very public and somewhat embarrassing because maybe there was a scandal or some, who knows, a variety of reasons that a company can fail, the LPs aren't going to be affected, right? Because they're in a separate vehicle. They're not going to be dragged into the papers. But if Google or Facebook puts money into a company like a Theranos or another company of that nature, which has a very public explosion, it can blow back on the corporate parent, and that can be very embarrassing, and that could cause other issues. And so I think that's another reason why a lot of corporate companies, corporates in general, like to invest directly in funds because they are somewhat removed from the negative publicity that may occur when if and when those companies have a bad failure.
So it means like the investment funds, it's like a buffer between the IT big tech company and between the startups. So they can ensure that all the liability, all the limitations will be in the correct way for them, yes? So.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the example of Theranos, which was a big failure and a big scandal, I mean, there were some corporates that were involved, and they were in the paper, and they had some explaining to do to their investors and to their shareholders, why did you invest in this company, right? But if they invested through a fund, that probably wouldn't have been happening. They would have been able to shield their involvement in that company because they were just an LP in a fund, and they are not involved in investment decisions, right? As an LP, generally speaking, you're not involved in investment decisions. The GP makes the investment decisions. You get money to the GP, and you're trusting the GP's expertise to make those decisions for you. And so if the GP makes a decision to invest in a company, and that company unfortunately fails, the LP themselves are generally not liable, both in terms of publicity, but also in terms of a legal liability.
Okay. So does it have any criteria or maybe some criteria list or requirements for the startup? And how do they know that this startup will be very, very successful?
It's whole different stories. We can spend another
Please
2
share.
hours explaining
Maybe
it.
1 minute?
So technically, it's just to do as much it's a job and proof of concept as possible in a given period of time. So we're trying to having this big education component to our fund is just to accelerate our startups to make tries and failures as much as possible. Most likely not. We are not expecting failures at the beginning, but it's okay. The whole word acceleration is about to make it much faster. And I like the expression at Jonathan's slide. That's the pandemic accelerated the 30 years of experience in digital transformation just in the 30 months. That's how the time is flying today.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think your question was around the criteria for success.
Criteria for success, for sustainable growth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think every venture fund has their own special sauce for what we look for in a company and how we underwrite a company. I think there are certain commonalities. I think Pavel said it well. Team is probably the most important thing when you're very early stage. And there is a reason why team is so important, because you're going to have lots of things that will come at you as a team that you didn't expect. A good team will figure ways around those obstacles. A bad team will blow up and fall apart. And so, if you back the right team, they will most likely withstand some of the early obstacles and figure a way to make the business work, whereas a subpar team will probably not. And there are lots of examples in the history of technology of companies that started doing one thing, ended up failing at that, and now become massively successful in a totally different business because the team was so good, right? Slack is one, Twitter's another. Those were not in the same businesses than they're in now that they're famous for, because the teams were so good that they realized, okay, we launched this product, we thought this was going to work, we launched it, the users hated that, but they really like this. Let's build this, right? And a good team can figure that out. A bad team will say, we don't know what to do, because we invested all of our mind share into this approach, and now it didn't succeed, and now we don't know what to do with the next step, and the business fails. And so getting the right team is absolutely critical. And then behind that is the obvious stuff. Is it a big enough market? Has it have the potential to be a large market? Because if it's too small a market, right, you really can't take it very far. If you're at a very, very large market, even if you're somewhat successful, you can still make a go of it. You can still have a significant business if the market is large enough. And then for us, again, every firm is different. The question we ask in our investment committee meetings is, are you solving a meaningful problem, right? And I don't want to disparage any other funds. You can make money doing lots of different things. But for us, we want to solve a meaningful problem. Is the startup doing something that is going to be important and has global impact? It doesn't mean we're an impact fund, but are you solving something that I think is a big intractable problem? Because if you can solve it and you can use technology to do that, it's defensible, it's going to affect a lot of people, and you can probably take it around the world, as opposed to a niche idea that might be resonant in Uzbekistan but nowhere else, or Georgia or Armenia, and it may be great in those markets, but it's not big enough. And for us as a venture fund, we need big exits for the reasons we talked about. We have a lot of failure in our portfolio, so we need some really big exits to make up for that. And so if, when we get these pitches from some startup saying, we're going to do a tourism business focused on the Georgian hiking market, again, nothing wrong with the Georgian hiking market, but it's probably not for us, because we want to solve big problems that are global in nature, and hopefully we'll be talking about these companies in 20 years, not for a year or two, and then they'll get acquired and nobody will care about them anymore.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your opinions and speech. So we have the last chance to raise your question. So do we have one question from the audience? No? Everything is clear? So let us summarize our panel. Thank you very much for coming. Could you please give me this one? Yeah. No problem. So I would like to summarize this panel. Many thanks to our speakers. And investments in the startups is the field that we have to develop rapidly in Central Asia region, applying the best practices from other states and private companies, including the support from the government, big tech companies, and investors and business angels. Thank you very much for the attention. Thank you very much for our speakers, Jonathan, Tower, Pavel, Sergey. Thank you very much for coming here.